Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sreshtha, Purposefully Passionate about Domestic Abuse Awareness. In this series, the intent is to raise awareness in respect of mental and emotional abuse. Sometimes we don't realize what mental and emotional abuse is, but we have a clear picture of what physical abuse is. So my intent is that after watching this series, you are able to recognize those signs in your relationship and make a change either by speaking to your partner, seeking professional help if necessary, or if you need to, safely exit the relationship. In this series, we have survivors, we have professionals, we have healers, and today I'm really happy to have a professional with me. Her name is Sabrina Mowlah-Baksh. She is from the Coalition of Domestic Violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Sabrina holds a BSc in Political Science and International Relations and an MSc in Gender and Development Studies from the University of the West Indies. Sabrina was the recipient of the prestigious Women's Peacemaker 2017 Visiting Scholar Award at the Joan B. Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice, University of San Diego. She is a member of several international women and security bodies, including International Civil Security Action Network, ICANN, Women's Alliance for Security Leadership, and women mediators across the Commonwealth. She served as a civil society advisory member to UN Women Caribbean. At present, she sits as a CSO representative on an interministerial committee to coordinate strategies to address gender-based violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Sabrina is also a member of the Civil Society National Reference Group for the Spotlight Initiative. She is the chair of a recently founded NGO called Women for Peace and Justice. At present, she is the general manager of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. So thank you so much, Sabrina. Welcome to our episodes. Tell us a little bit about yourself after that wonderful introduction.
Thank you very much. And I value the opportunity to be here to share my knowledge and my experience on this topic. And actually, I've been doing this kind of work, working with communities, working on women's development, working in the area of empowerment for over 30 years. So I have both the experience and the academic background from which I speak. On a more cordial level, I enjoy playing cricket. I played a lot of women's cricket in my time. I enjoy listening to music, going to the beach, and traveling. Those, just to share some of the lighter parts of me. So it's not just to share so much around my professional work, but also to share, the human aspect of me, which we often tend to forget in this kind of work.
Yes, that is so wonderful. It's always nice to recognize that as humans, we have so many different facets and we enjoy each and everything that we do. And even though we treat with heavy topics, we also love music, because I also love music and going to the beach and women's cricket. Wow, that's so awesome. Yes. So as we get into our episode today, so I asked Sabrina specifically to talk on the cycle of abuse. So in previous episodes, you would have seen me mention this is the cycle of abuse, and we have had 4 little quadrants in there. In episode 5, I had mentioned it. And in episodes 8 and 9, we also referred to it. But just to explain to our viewers exactly what it is and what each of those quadrants mean, Sabrina is here to help us with that understanding. So Sabrina, tell us, what is the cycle of abuse?
Thank you very much. So the cycle of abuse is really a theory advanced just to try to understand and describe patterns of behavior associated with abuse. And the cycle of abuse has different phases identified. Of course, we understand that abuse comes in many forms, such as physical, verbal, psychological, and sexual. And the people abused by their partners are not constantly being abused, and the abuse is never inflicted at totally random times. There is a definite pattern to the abuse, which is reoccurring and appears to have 3 distinct phases. And of course, these phases are known as, and is referred to as, a pattern of abuse or a cycle of abuse. And there are 3 phases involved. 1, the honeymoon phase. 2, the tension phase. And 3, the phase of abuse. And of course, once it occurs, then it reoccurs and reoccurs and reoccurs again. And if you'd like, at this time, I'd like to go into the cycle of abuse, starting with the honeymoon phase.
Yes, thank you.
So the first phase is the honeymoon phase, and this phase is how the relationship starts. The abusive individual creates a safe space filled with love and a sense of security in the relationship. This phase holds a significant draw for the person who is experiencing the abuse, as feelings of love are very powerful. The abusive person acts in ways that they know that the partner will desire and appreciate, do romantic stuff, be the perfect partner. If the perpetrator is a male, will do gentlemanly things, bring flowers, chocolates, and behaves as if as if they're the perfect partner. So at this honeymoon phase, there's a lot of role playing going on by the perpetrator, in that there is a projection of, I am the perfect person, full of love. And of course, this phase is used so that the victim is drawn to that person and drawn into a relationship with that person. So after the honeymoon phase, but let me point out that the honeymoon phase, once the person becomes a part of the relationship, takes a different turn, or a different way, or manifests itself differently once the person is in a relationship. So we go now to the second phase, which is known as the tension phase. And the tension phase refers to that period in which there are difficulties starting to occur, if there is a period of conflict, because all relationships are not conflict free. So there will be disagreements within the context of a relationship. So during this phase, the person experiencing the abuse is aware that tension is building within the relationship, because you've been in a relationship with the person maybe for a while now, or you're learning about that person. So you learn to gauge when the person is becoming angry, when the person is not comfortable, and you learn as well how the perpetrator treats with issues of conflict. So during this phase, whether it's brought on by a situation at work, a situation with the family, at this stage, the perpetrator gets agitated. The victim starts to do things to avoid the full abuse. So the victim will try to do things right. So the abuser may do things like the silent treatment, be annoyed, and try to contain the abuse. However, that does not last long. Whereas the victim starts to, if the children are too noisy, if food has to be cooked, if there are expectations on the part of the victim does everything possible to placate the abuser or the perpetrator. But what the victim has to understand is that no matter what the victim does during this time, it will not stop the abuse. That's just a cycle. So you may feel that by walking on eggshells and doing everything right, it will stop it, but it will not stop it. It's part of the cycle. And at this stage, the perpetrator may use some terminologies and actions to control the victim. And the person, the abuser, the perpetrator at this time may say, if you love me, you will not do these things, don't push me to do this, don't push me to behave in a certain way, play mind games with the victim. The abuser knows that the victim, is scared of the perpetrator, so will attempt to play mind games, will enter into situations of blaming the victim. I like things a certain way, but you do not do it. I like my food hot, you do not, my food is not hot, I like the house clean, my clothes need to be a certain way. So all of this happened during the tension building phase. And then it starts to grow and grow, and then it reached to a point where it's called the explosive phase. And this is where the actual, forms of abuse occur, whether it's physical, sexual, emotional, financial, etc. So it occurs whether there is shouting, there is physical violence. So it happens during the explosive phase, and there is nothing that the victim can do at this stage to stop it. And at this stage, the perpetrator, the abuser, may use some language saying, "You are the one, you pushed me to do it. Because of what you did, I had no other choice but to react in this way. Why would you make me do this? Why you're responsible for this?" So there is a situation in which the perpetrator is putting all of the blame on the victim, and shifting the blame during the abuse. Of course, during the tension building phase, and of course the explosive phase, while when the abuse is done, after the shouting, the beating, whatever form of abuse it takes, the perpetrator feels relief, some sort of release, because all those pent up feelings, whatever, and so on, is no longer there because of the abuse. But of course, the victim at this point feels numb, is nursing injuries, the self-worth is gone, the self-esteem is very low, does not know how to react, does not know how to behave, how to move, sometimes even moving a step. So sometimes even the victim will freeze at this time, because the victim does not know how to react at this stage. And after this is done, and of course the perpetrator exhales, and the victim goes through that period of numbness, and goes into a particular zone, both of them, and especially the perpetrator, will go back into a phase, the phase known as the honeymoon phase. So that at this point in time, the perpetrator, the abuser, feels remorse, feels sorry, and may and may express feeling guilty, and may say things like, "Sweetheart, darling, I am so sorry. I do love you, but I was drunk. It was the alcohol, it was the drugs, it was the situation at work, it was my family coming down on me. I was stressed. Please do not leave me. We can work it out. I will go for counseling. Will you forgive me? I will quit the drinking. I will quit the alcohol. I will kill myself if you leave me. I cannot live without you." So these are feelings that's expressed during that honeymoon phase that comes after the actual abuse. And then, of course, you will get lovely gifts during that time. In the honeymoon phase, the perpetrator goes back into that behavior, bringing you flowers, buying your favorite things, something for the house, whatever, and so on. And the victim at this time, because the victim, this is who the victim wants the perpetrator to be. This is the ideal persona that the victim wants. The victim is very, very happy to be in this space, because the victim is receiving the love and the respect and the remorse and everything else that the victim wants out of the abuser, the perpetrator, because essentially the victim loves the perpetrator. And it is very important to understand that, sometimes when reports are made to the police, and sometimes the police come, and people encourage the victims, report. The victim finds it difficult to report, essentially because of this phase, because the person has not gone, because the abuser, the perpetrator, has now gone into the honeymoon phase. And it doesn't take longer, because the cycle can be all at the same time. It can be within one day, it could be in an hour of the abuse. So it doesn't take very long for everything to happen. So the victim becomes confused. What do I do? Do I report the person, maybe the father of my children? Do I report the person that I love? Who's gonna take care of me if this person goes to jail? If I report this person, will reprisals come for me after I make the report? So there are all kinds of things swirling around in the victim's mind at this time. that prevents the victim from taking action. And remember, I also talk about freezing. The person freezes up. The person goes into a particular zone where they're trying to recover from their abuse, and that could take a while as well. So the cycle of abuse, it's not a simple cycle, especially for the victim. So it's very complicated. People need to understand it, because in the absence of understanding the cycle, those looking on, the family members, the friends, the support networks, the community, there tends to be a lot of victim blaming and victim shaming when the victim doesn't take action without understanding what the victim is experiencing.
So in that space between the explosion and going back into the honeymoon phase, and in terms of the victim, because this is something society doesn't understand, right? Moving from somebody just abused you to you're still intimately tied with that person, and you feel sorry. One of the reasons people don't like to report to is they don't want to get the person in trouble. This is somebody they love.
Sure.
What goes on mentally? I don't know if you can explain a little bit of what goes on mentally in their mind to pacify them into staying into this relationship after witnessing that explosion of abuse.
You mean from the perpetrator?
No, from the victim.
Okay, so I think it's important to understand the state that the victim is in. Remember, and I do not know if you had anybody address this, but abuse, violence, and domestic violence, intimate partner violence, gender-based violence is about power and control.
Yes.
And there is something known as the power and control wheel. And the power and control wheels explains the many ways in which the perpetrator gets the victim to be in a place where they can exercise this power and control. And that's very important for people to understand. So the perpetrator exercises all the forms of abuse. So it comes under financial abuse, where the perpetrator takes away all forms of independence, controls all the money, controls all the finances, doesn't want the victim to work. So the person does not have financial independence and is totally dependent on the abuser. So that's the financial abuse. Of course, we know about the physical abuse. So I will physically beat you to a pulp if you do not do the things that I want. Then, very important, there's the emotional or the psychological abuse, where the perpetrator attacks the person's self-worth. You're not good enough. You can't do this right. You can't dress. You can't cook. You can't do, you're dumb. And all of the derogatory names, which undermines the person's self-worth, self-esteem, a person's ability to make any decisions during the emotional and psychological abuse. As well, the victim's support networks are cut off, meaning that the victim is not allowed to have friends. The victim is not allowed to go out. The victim is not allowed to even have relationships with the victim's family, so that it cuts off even who you can go to if you need help. And then, of course, there are threats to the children. If you do anything, I will hurt the children. If you do anything, I will take the children away from you. You will never see the children again. Right. So because of this power and controlled wheel, it's an all out. It's a range of abuse that happens all together to bring the victim to the place where the victim is unable to respond. The victim is unable to make a decision. The victim feels that there is nobody that I can turn to. The victim feels that if I take action, my life will be in danger. My children's lives will be in danger. My sanity will be in danger. I will have nowhere to go because of the damaged of relationships I have with my family. I have no form of income. I am not skilled because you stopped me from going to school. You've stopped me from working. So can you imagine what's going on in this victim's mind? In the victim's mind, I am totally dependent on this person. Where am I going to go? Where am I going to carry on 3-4 children? If I go to a friend, how long will I stay there? After 1 month, how long will that person take me? I have had conflicts with my family because of this relationship, because of this person. How long will they keep me? Then also because of religious and some religious beliefs, families do not take back the victim. They believe that once you get married, you have to sort your problems out and you remain with your partner or your husband, or for life. So there are so many reasons associated with why a victim does not or is not in a position to make those critical decisions, and that is why a lack of understanding of this leads to the victim blaming and shaming, because of not understanding this fully.
Yeah, so something that we do as humans is we judge everybody based on our own experience, right? Without understanding that this person, and when persons in abusive situations speak out, they tell you one little thing that happened in a volume of a plethora of things that happened to them, and you judge on this one thing. But what is going on in that abusive cycle is really, it takes place all the time, and it continues all the time. I did have someone speak to the power imbalance, but not to the power wheel. So thank you so much for bringing that up, and all the things within that wheel, which we have addressed on episodes before. Alienating you from your family in episode 3. The survivor Sam spoke about how she couldn't even speak to her parents after a certain point in time. Talking about not wanting you to do certain things, giving up your studies. In episode 2, again, we had someone who her husband told her he would pay for her to go to school because she got married young at 18 or 19, but he never did that. And it is really to understand how all of the person's freedom is really
encaged. That's right, exert power and control.
Yeah, so that the person feels that they have nothing. If it is, I leave, I can't work, I don't have a place to stay, I don't have money. And all of these things as a human is very frightening, and it's not simple to step out and say, okay, this is me world, here I am. It's not so simple.
But just to also clarify that there are persons in abusive relationships who have means. They may have resources, they have good jobs. However, they also stay in abusive relationships. So the question might be, I do not fall under that category in which I just described. I have my own house, I have my own car, I have my own property, I have a good job, so why don't I just leave? And of course, it goes back to, of course, the other types of abuse, the emotional abuse, the psychological abuse, where I love this person and the person has me in such a space that I do not feel that I can live without that person. I can function on my own. So it's not totally about having the access, but of course, the power and impact of the psychological and emotional abuse that comes with it, that comes with being in an abusive relationship. And I'm saying all of this to say that this is a very complex situation. A 2018 survey done in Trinidad, a prevalence survey done in Trinidad, show that 1 in every 3 women have experienced at least one form of violence in their lifetime. But listen to this. The same survey also showed that 1 in every 3 women stay silent about their abuse and do not disclose their abuse, which is very, very frightening. So we have a lot of people walking around this place who we interact on a daily basis, who experience at least some form of abuse, but they just remain silent about it. They do not disclose. They do not feel comfortable to disclose. And that is why we were talking, in our initial discussion, we talked about dealing with persons with empathy, with understanding, with humaneness, so that we have to create an environment where persons are comfortable with us, so that they feel a sense of security that I can trust this person to disclose. And if that environment does not exist, then of course that person will continue to stay silent, because they will feel, if I disclose this, because I come from a prominent family, because I come from a well-known family, because of where I am situated in my community, people will look down on me, I will feel ashamed. So it's a very sensitive, complicated topic, and that's why it continues to exist in the numbers and to the extent that it exists today in our country.
Yeah, so what you spoke about is actually the premise for the series, right? The first statistic you spoke about, which I had seen in 2016 in the Trinidad Express, with 1 in 3 women being abused. I just thought about if I had, and in trying to promote this series, if you have 300 friends, female friends on Facebook, 100 of those persons have been in some sort of abusive situation, but we don't speak about it. And quite honestly, in trying to promote awareness for this series, my own, I wouldn't say best friends, but persons who I've known and worked with have been in such difficult situations, and it hurt me so much. I mean, I was glad that they came forward, but at the same time, it brought home the fact that the person sitting next to you doing the best that they can, leading teams, getting awards in work, is someone who is at home going through the worst situation and can't even raise her head and speak to persons because her partner would accuse her of looking at other men or things like that. So on the emotional and the mental side, which is really the side I'm trying to raise the awareness for, I'm really glad you brought home that point, because persons in these situations, they may have resources to leave. They may have things that could get them out of the situation. But again, trapped in that intimacy with the person and wanting a certain life for their children. Even cultural abuse, which makes you think that you can't do certain things, you can't leave divorce, it's not something that is an option. All of these things play on the part of women and men in general, which is the point of this series, right? Not to blame or not to shame anyone, but to heal through compassion. Because if we understand that this is what other persons are going through, and I'm sure we recognize in our life, even if we are not being abused, there may be things that we can change in how we deal with people and how we accept how people deal with us, so that just maybe in the future for our children, they could live a healthier, happier life, knowing your self-worth. Because sometimes we know our self-worth in our corporate life, right? We could deal in your corporate life with the mental and emotional abuse, but then at home, your self-worth is not the same because of whatever culture you were brought up in and what we see in society as being accepted as okay. You know, if he shouts at me, it's okay. If he's not talking to me for a week, it's okay. He's the man. He's supposed to control all the finances, even though I am making most of the money. So these are the things that we trying to break with this series. And I'm so glad that you brought up all those points. Before time runs out, I just would like you to speak about how children are affected within the cycle, because a lot of times we think we are protecting children by staying, but it may not be so. So if you could just speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. And when there are children involved, you know, in situations of violence, it impacts children tremendously. And research have shown that children who've grown up in situations of violence, they tend, not all of them, but you know, there's a greater possibility that those children will end up in violent relationships because it's normalized within the family setting. So they are learning that, you know, this is what relationships are supposed to look like. In a conflict situation, this is how you solve the conflict. By if you're a male, you know, this is you know, you beat up on the woman. If you're a female, this is how you're supposed to remain subservient. You are the one who is supposed to receive the, you know, you are the recipient of the violence. So of course it affects the children in that you socialize them into thinking that this violence is normal and this violence is acceptable and this is the way, and this is how you're supposed to perceive and conceive of a relationship and a family. So that's at one level. Then the other ways, children of course become distraught in all kinds of ways. Some the children of course are recipients of the verbal and all of the other kinds of violence. So they're beaten, they, you know, physically and otherwise. They receive the insults. And the same way, they are classified under victim as well. So in the same way that the partner, the victim, which is the adult, experience all those feelings of numbness and fright and everything else, the children go through the same thing. They experience the same thing. They are, they have feelings of anger. They have they are frightened. They are traumatized. Their mental health is affected, and sometimes they even end up blaming the victim, because they ask, why doesn't this person leave the relationship? Why doesn't this person fight back? Why doesn't this person do the things that the perpetrator wants in order to stop the abuse? So all kinds of things even go on with the children. It affects them in so many ways. Some of them wet their beds. They cannot function in school. They're backward in terms of their academic performance. Um, it's difficult for them to develop relationships with other children and to function normally with other children. They may demonstrate violence among their peers, and it may manifest itself in all kinds of behavior, in the play field, in the school setting, wherever, because they're dealing with a whole lot, and it comes out in different ways, and very often negative ways, wherever they go. So and then, of course, we often hear victims say, I stay because of the children. And we understand that, and we understand the thinking. But I can tell you that at the end of the day, exposing children to this creates more harm than good. You may feel it's the best thing because they have a place to stay and they may have food to eat. But what are the other risks? I'm being destroyed mentally, emotionally, and otherwise. And then I may either grow up to be a victim or a perpetrator, and then the cycle continues and continues and continues. So when will it end? So I am terrified and scared about what goes on with our children, and in order to break the cycle and to stop the cycle, it has to start with what we expose our children with. 2, what are the experiences of the children, ensuring that our children experience and encounter and have positive interaction, loving environments, loving family settings. So, and maybe to shift gears, this is where we need to start, if we need to change it.
Yeah, so moving away from the notion that any nuclear family is the best for children is something we need to do, and understanding that even though we don't see it, energy, which is what is created from any sort of tension, it lives in the home and it does affect the children. And another point I want to make from what you said is also having compassion for children. Sometimes when children are acting out, we want to punish. They need to listen and they need to do this and they need to do that. But children are human too. And when they are going through these situations and they don't have the know-it-all to say, well, mommy, this is really affecting me. Mommy, I don't like this. Mommy, this makes me feel so hurt. I have so much pent-up anger. A child cannot express or say that because they really don't know. And if you are keeping it in, they don't think it's okay anyway. So when our children are acting out, again, I am a firm believer in therapy. I am a firm believer in getting to the bottom of what is really affecting the child and dealing with it, as opposed to plastering a punishment on the child because they can't just conform to your schedule for you to be able to do what you need.
Definitely. Acting out is a sign. Acting out is actually a call for help. And I think it's important for us to understand that, and we kind of treat with it violently as well. So it's around the lessons, very, very important. How we treat with situations, will say to the person, this is how it ought to be treated with, and this is the normal. So we have to revisit the normal. And I think you were talking about that in the context of identifying the nuclear family as the normal, So I think that's a very, very important point. We have to look at what we consider to be the normal, and and the socio-cultural beliefs and practices that support the normal, and have some conversations around whether the normal is more harmful and endangers us more than identifying a place where we need to get to and identifying positive behaviors as opposed to harmful behaviors. So that's very important.
Yes. So thank you so much, Sabrina. And if you are looking at the episode as well, guys, it starts with us, right? We are the ones who have tuned into this episode, the ones who are looking for understanding and compassion and respect of what is happening in our homes. It really starts with us to change our own relationships and to teach our children what is healthy. We don't have to continue the cycle. We don't have to continue what our parents taught us. Not that anything is wrong with what they taught us, but they really did have limited information. And now we are open to so much. We are the ones to make the change. So I ask you, if it is, you are watching these episodes and enjoying the conversation, let's take it further and make the change within our lives, especially for our children. So Sabrina, as we close, I just want to thank you so much about explaining everything you did in respect of the cycle of abuse, how abuse really starts, which I haven't really spoken about in the episodes, in that honeymoon phase where the perpetrator really does everything to get you bound into that intimate relationship, moving into the detention phase where certain things are blamed in respect of why maybe the person is not yourself. You feel like you're walking on eggshells. I actually had someone tell me recently, I'm staying a little bit away to avoid an argument. All of this is the tension phase. And then we move into that explosive phase, which could be 1 minute, it could be 1 week, it could be any amount of time, but it is part of the cycle. And then after that, I like too that you spoke about what the perpetrator feels, because it is important to understand what they are going through and also what the victim feeling numb. And the perpetrator is feeling remorse and may do it again. But again, if it is we do not address our feelings and what we are going through, we can't come out of it. So Sabrina, I really am so grateful that you agreed to share with us. And I would ask you as we close, if there's any message you want to leave for the persons watching the series.
Yes, definitely. I think there are 3 things that I want to see and to leave you with. And first of all, it is our responsibility, all of us, you, me, individually, collectively, to take actions to stop gender-based violence, to stop domestic violence, to stop intimate partner violence. And we can do it by providing an enabling environment, meaning a safe environment, an environment in which we do not blame the victims, we do not shame the victims, and an environment in which the victim will feel comfortable in saying, I have experienced or I am experiencing violence, and there will be no consequences to that disclosure. So a safe environment for disclosing, that's very, very important. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd want to say to those who are experiencing violence, both perpetrators and victims, help is available. Get the help. You cannot do this on your own. It would be very, very, very difficult. Take the first step. There are organizations such as my organization, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and several other organizations who remains available to offer you that help. That's very, very important. We understand, we know it's difficult, but you can do it. You can do it, and you need to, to take the first step in taking charge of your lives and the lives of your children. And the third thing I'd like to leave with us is that we can do things as a community to support in many, many, many ways. It takes the community to address this issue. So learn as much as you can about this issue. You cannot take action unless you understand what you're dealing with. Provide support mechanisms. If you find that there are institutions around that's not doing what they're supposed to do, come together as a community and say, listen, this is what we need to do in our community so that persons experiencing this in our community have access to help. And I will take responsibility for creating and providing those services within my community. And if it doesn't exist, agitate for it nationally. So there are so many ways in which we can help by providing resources to the families, finding jobs, for the families, So there are very different ways, various ways in which we can provide support, but we first need to understand and accept that if we are not part of the solution, then we're most certainly part of the problem.
Thank you so much. And as you spoke about number 2, do you just want to tell our viewers, in case they don't know, what services you all provide and how they can contact you all?
Definitely. So at the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, we do provide free counseling, free psychosocial support and case management services. And we do also provide free legal counseling consultations. So we help you through that process if you need to take out a protection order, to pursue a divorce and so on. We help you to understand what your options are, and we provide that counseling for you as well. So you're free to contact us. Our numbers are 624-0402, 627-8744. Reach out to us. Our email address, cadvtt@gmail.com.
Okay, and you have a website as well, right?
Yes, coalitionagainstdomesticviolence.org, and our Facebook page, TNT Coalition Against Domestic Violence. You'll find us there. Lots of on our Facebook, you'll find lots of informational videos that we post, so you can have a look. You can also send messages to us via Facebook.
Right. Okay. I think I had shared a couple of the videos you had. So don't worry if you missed all of that information. You can check in the description box below. I will put all of the information to contact the Coalition of Domestic Violence. Yes. So again, thank you so much, guys. If you are or know someone in a domestically abusive situation, the number to call is 800-SAVE. So thank you everyone for joining us. I will see you guys next week. Bye.